Hi, welcome back to Listen2Riches. Today, we will explore the book, The Power of Self-Coaching, with the subtitle, The 5 Essential Steps to Creating the Life You Want. Before delving into the content of this book, let me begin with a story. The protagonist of this story is Tracy, a 48-year-old salesperson who has never been married. During his therapy sessions, he uttered the following words: "I've spent my entire life struggling, but I have nothing to show for it. I live in a rundown apartment, and my life consists of work and indulging in alcohol and snacks. I fear death, I fear survival, and most of all, I fear a lifetime of loneliness." The doctor suggested antidepressants, but what good would they do? They won't change my circumstances. The doctor also pointed out Tracy's poor physical condition and advised him to change his lifestyle habits. Tracy chuckled and said, "I've been surviving with these habits. I'm a stubborn, self-destructive person destined for a solitary existence." At this point, Tracy, in agony, asked his therapist whether someone like him could still change. The therapist he spoke to was the author of this book, Joseph Luciani. He told Tracy that all the problems he faced were a result of his long-standing negative mindset. Negative thinking may seem unchangeable, but it is merely a habitual thought pattern with its roots in insecurity. You may encounter such individuals in your own life. They appear distant and constantly shut themselves off from deep connections with others. However, this behavior stems from their inability to cope with situations they can't control, which makes them feel profoundly insecure. There's a poem in an ancient city titled Avoidance, which goes like this: "You don't want to plant flowers as you say you don't want to witness even a single petal falling." Yes, to avoid endings, you avoid beginnings altogether. This beautiful poem aptly represents the manifestation of negative avoidance psychology driven by insecurity. However, habitual thinking is just that, a habit. Although correcting it can be challenging, once you find the right methods, it's entirely possible to rectify. Today, we will discuss the book Change Yourself, which is a culmination of the author's experience in treating negative mindsets. The author believes that we can eliminate the tiresome and despair-inducing negative thoughts in our lives through skillful self-dialogue. By following the methods outlined in the book for self-assessment and training, you'll discover that those thought patterns causing insecurity can indeed be corrected. The author of this book, Joseph Luciani, is an internationally renowned expert in psychological counseling and therapy. He is also a prominent American psychologist with over 30 years of clinical therapy and counseling experience. In this book, he has devised a 5-step psychological therapy method specifically tailored to help the majority of individuals plagued by insecurity, enabling them to break free from negative mindsets and reclaim their lives. Next, I will introduce the 3 key aspects of this book. First, why insecurity is not innate but rather a bad habit. Second, why attempting to have complete control over life paradoxically fails to provide a sense of security. Third, how to liberate yourself from the grip of insecurity through a 5-step self-training process. Let's delve into the content of the first section, why insecurity isn't innate but merely a bad habit. First and foremost, it's essential to clarify that insecurity isn't entirely negative. Just as moderate nervousness can help a speaker focus and perform better, a moderate level of insecurity can serve as a driving force for personal growth and development. However, as with anything, excess can lead to problems. When a person's inner insecurity becomes excessive, it can result in psychological issues. The author asserts that nobody is born lacking insecurity. Insecurity is something that gradually develops in our lives as a result of our experiences. Some might argue that certain children exhibit shyness, reluctance to try new things, or fear of the unknown from a very young age. Does this imply that insecurity is innate? It's important to distinguish between insecurity and personality traits. Personality traits refer to genetic predispositions towards specific physiological or psychological characteristics. For example, some individuals may be predisposed to gaining weight, while others may have introverted or extroverted tendencies, mathematical or athletic talents, and so on. These are various personality traits, but insecurity isn't one of them, nor can it be said that people with certain personality traits are destined to lack security. It's akin to two people using the same camera to take photos, yet the resulting pictures may be vastly different. The content of the photo depends on the focus, not the camera itself. So, how does insecurity come about? It originates from our childhood, tied to our understanding of the world around us. Every child encounters questions and situations beyond their comprehension during their growth, which might leave them feeling helpless or traumatized and lead to the development of insecurity. For instance, an emotionally sensitive boy ridiculed in class as a mommy's boy might become emotionally reserved, thinking that displaying emotions is wrong. Another child might avoid making mistakes because of perfectionist expectations, thinking they must always perform flawlessly. Therefore, insecurity is, in fact, a common occurrence in the process of growing up. It can be considered inevitable since no child can have a perfect upbringing and will always face various challenges. It's important to note that insecurity is essentially a distortion of reality perception. If left unchecked, insecurity can gradually take root in the depths of one's psyche, becoming a part of their personality, affecting their thought processes and cognitive habits, and ultimately having a negative impact on their life. Everyone encounters setbacks and difficulties in life. However, driven by insecurity, individuals are more likely to compare current problems with past issues, especially those they couldn't handle during childhood, leading to negative psychological feelings that influence their judgment of facts. Let's illustrate this with an example. There's a classmate who has been overweight since childhood. In his early years, he faced ridicule and mockery from classmates, leaving a lasting scar in his mind. Consequently, as he grew up, he developed a deep-seated insecurity about his weight. When discussing weight-related topics with friends, even in innocuous conversations, he was overly sensitive, leading to strained relationships and eventual fallouts. The above example is just a relatively mild illustration of how insecurity can affect one's life. For some individuals, insecurity can become so overwhelming that it disrupts their ability to live a normal life. Anxiety is one of the most typical habitual thought patterns triggered by insecurity. Anxiety driven by insecurity differs significantly from our regular concerns. While concerns prompt us to think about solutions to problems, anxiety continually leads individuals to envision negative outcomes. For instance, when faced with an illness, a concerned person might consider whether they should seek medical attention if their condition doesn't improve tomorrow. On the other hand, an anxious person may continuously worry about how severe the situation might become, even thinking that it's already terrible. This difference highlights that individuals dominated by insecurity cannot objectively assess problems, they simply dwell on them without taking action. Their worries are based on erroneous judgments and distortions of reality, making problems even harder to resolve, thus trapping them in a cycle of anxiety. To sum up, insecurity isn't innate but gradually develops in our lives, typically stemming from childhood traumas. Since insecurity is rooted in distorted perceptions and misjudgments of reality, once it becomes a habit, it often affects an individual's thinking and cognition. In severe cases, it can disrupt normal life. So, can having accurate perceptions and judgments about life help us break free from insecurity and attain a sense of security? Let's delve into the content of the second section, why attempting to have complete control over life fails to provide a sense of security. Before we delve into this section, we need to clarify a concept. Control is a human instinct. When people perceive danger, they instinctively seek control to protect themselves. For example, when we lift a baby and suddenly put them down, the baby instinctively grabs onto our arm. For the baby, the abrupt loss of support is a dangerous situation, and clutching our arm tightly is their attempt to maintain control and avoid falling. This situation is common in other scenarios as well. For instance, when in water, people struggle desperately to grab onto grass at the shore, or when they accidentally trip and fall, their initial reaction is to quickly grab onto nearby objects. Control is originally a beneficial instinct. It can help us avoid danger and live better. It's akin to wearing practical but not so fashionable shoes on a rainy day or paying attention to our diet to maintain good health. However, insecurity is an emotion that leaves people feeling helpless and out of control, driving them to seek control in life to attain a sense of psychological security. Nevertheless, if the desire for control becomes too intense and transforms into an obsession with trying to completely dominate life, it paradoxically fails to provide a sense of security. Let's illustrate this point with an example. There's a 28-year-old woman who had a very happy childhood, growing up in a harmonious family where her parents loved her and she was well-liked by her friends. From a young age, she dreamed of becoming a teacher, and now she has realized that dream, becoming a well-known elementary school teacher. On the surface, everything seems to be going smoothly and she doesn't have many worries. However, after becoming a teacher, she began to feel immense pressure and often experienced anxiety and unease. Why is that? It turns out that her father was very strict during her childhood and she felt compelled to excel in everything to earn her father's praise. In reality, she had always lacked a sense of security because she believed that if she didn't perform well, her father wouldn't love her anymore. Despite her later life going smoothly, this childhood trauma persisted and didn't disappear. Consequently, she constantly sought control over others' affection through her well-behaved demeanor, turning it into an obsession and a way to attain security. So, when she faced a group of unruly students at school, she naturally felt helpless and anxious. This is actually a strategy for controlling life, a pursuit of perfection. However, the pursuit of perfection isn't inherently wrong, but if one becomes fixated on the idea of having complete control over everything, it often leads to a demanding and unforgiving life. Any form of criticism and blame becomes unacceptable because their dependence on others' evaluations has become their source of security. It's important to understand that we cannot control how others perceive us, so the pursuit of constantly receiving positive evaluations is unrealistic. Of course, it's impossible to become a flawless individual. In the face of an insecure environment, another control strategy is avoidance. For instance, putting aside current tasks to take a relaxing walk, maintaining distance from someone with the flu to avoid getting infected, declining invitations from friends because of exhaustion, and so on. Here, control is achieved by isolating oneself from danger through controlling one's actions. However, someone with deep-seated insecurity also isolates themselves from life. You've likely encountered individuals like this in life. They appear emotionally distant, seemingly reluctant to form deep connections with others, keeping themselves locked in a solitary shell. In reality, they simply can't cope with the lack of control that comes with close relationships, which feels profoundly unsafe to them. The pursuit of perfection or avoidance is still about controlling one's behavior to control life. There's yet another form of control, attempting to control the people and events in one's environment. The primary strategy employed here is deception. It's worth mentioning that there are 3 different levels of deception: white lies, gray lies, and black lies. White lies are the most common, involving an inability to say no and difficulty in refusing others, often saying things contrary to one's true feelings to please others. For instance, a friend asks you to pick them up from the airport at 4 a.m., and even though you really don't want to, you reluctantly agree to keep the friendship intact. Gray lies, on the other hand, result from betraying someone's trust and using lies to regain it. Individuals resort to lying to cover up their mistakes and regain others' trust. Then there are black lies, which involve deliberate deception. Regardless of the form, all of these are strategies that deviate from confronting life truthfully. They are manifestations of the desire to control life driven by insecurity. However, over time, you'll discover that there's no foolproof strategy for controlling life in this world. The more you obsessively seek control, the more uncontrollable life becomes, and your inner sense of security remains elusive. The pursuit of perfection is an unattainable goal. Avoidance doesn't shield you from emotional setbacks, and you still have to endure loneliness. As for deception, there will always be a moment when the truth comes to light. So, there you have it, the second key point of this book that I've shared with you. Insecurity makes people want to control life, but life is inherently uncontrollable. Trying to gain psychological security by controlling life is an incorrect approach. So, what is the right way? Next, let's delve into the third major topic, how to break free from the grip of insecurity through a 5-step self-training process. The 5-step psychological therapy method, also known as self-talk therapy, is a proven and effective self-training method in clinical practice. In essence, it enables individuals to identify the root of their psychological issues through self-dialogue and take targeted steps towards self-repair. These psychological issues include anxiety, depression, fatigue, despair, and other emotional challenges. Since it's about addressing the root causes, our first step naturally involves identifying the symptoms, which means learning to recognize whether we harbor insecurity in our psyche and how to assess it accurately. Mentioning insecurity, you might think that most people have felt it to some degree, but when it comes to identifying such an abstract concept, it may seem daunting. This is where the method of self-dialogue comes in, helping you pinpoint the specific traces of insecurity in your life, namely through your language habits. For example, someone who frequently uses phrases like must or should often falls into the trap of pursuing perfection. Someone who worries a lot about what if this happens and I can't handle it may develop avoidance tendencies. Those who frequently hesitate saying, should I call him? But what if he's still upset, or often feel guilty, thinking if I don't go pick him up, he'll be very sad, are usually overly concerned with others' evaluations. These language habits expose that you're a person harboring insecurity. Apart from this, more detailed assessments require specific questions to test yourself. It's essential to note that this self-assessment of language habits isn't about right or wrong. This analysis isn't a strict calculation, but rather assists you in identifying and assessing them correctly. You need to engage in self-dialogue tests and reevaluations repeatedly to learn to recognize the hidden insecurity in your mind, and this is only the first step in self-training. Once you've identified insecurity, what's the next step? This brings us to the next phase. You need to divide yourself into 2 parts, clearly distinguishing between the healthy thinking you and the negative thinking you plagued by insecurity. In simple terms, you must differentiate between thoughts based on facts and those entirely fictional, as healthy thoughts are typically grounded in reality, while fictional ones tend to lead to negative emotions. This is, of course, achieved through self-dialogue. How do you do it specifically? You can recall a situation where you had to make a choice and think about what was going through your mind. For example, let's say you're a basketball player and in your recent games you couldn't make any shots, leading you to believe that you're terrible at basketball and considering quitting the team. At this point, do you notice something amiss? In reality, you didn't contemplate your thoughts, you merely reacted to the fear of not making any shots. Believing that you're terrible at basketball is purely fictional because you couldn't make any shots in your recent games. Subsequently, you followed the fictional belief that you're bad at basketball and decided to quit the team. This is a slightly extreme example, but in everyday life, when we find ourselves in psychological turmoil or intense emotional states, can we truly discern whether our current reactions are based on fact or fiction? Furthermore, if you treat your fictional beliefs as facts, they might indeed become facts. This is often referred to in psychology as a self-fulfilling prophecy. For instance, if you lack confidence about passing an exam and spend the entire time thinking, I won't pass, you're likely to fail. However, before the exam, believing that you won't pass is just your fictional belief, not a fact. So, before making reactions and decisions, it might be worthwhile to write down your thoughts, engage in self-dialogue and analysis, and see which you is truly influencing your life. In summary, any feelings, assumptions about others' thoughts, or predictions of future events are not facts. Self-dialogue has taught us that healthy thinking is a choice you can make. Now that you know how to distinguish whether your thoughts are based on reality or fiction, when you realize that your insecurity is influencing your thoughts, you can avoid making erroneous reactions. This leads us to the third step of self-training, which we will discuss next, firmly saying no to thoughts of insecurity. Some might argue that they have no control over what goes on in their minds and, therefore, cannot prevent these thoughts from dictating their actions. But is that really the case? Could it be because you haven't actually said no to them? For example, in life, we frequently say no to many things. Some we take seriously, such as refusing theft, and others not so seriously, like individuals who have experienced famine still hoarding food during prosperous times despite verbally committing not to. This is indulging your own insecurity. It's easy to become entangled in the thoughts of insecurity that occupy our minds, plunging into a whirlpool of imagination. This actually leads us to the fourth step of self-training, forgetting and immersing yourself in the present moment. When faced with a problem, we often get caught up worrying about it, and few can extricate themselves from this worry to focus on solving the problem. However, this is precisely what we need to learn, to forget these worries through shifting our attention and immersing ourselves in the present moment. Meditation is also an effective method for breaking free from psychological worries and fears. It seems that, through the method of self-dialogue, we can achieve these goals and break free from the grip of insecurity, leading a healthier life. However, it's not enough. You also need to learn the fifth and final step of self-training, self-motivation. Self-motivation here has two layers of meaning. The first layer is about experiencing the joy of success early on, starting with challenges of low difficulty and low risk, using simple achievements as stepping stones. This can motivate you to take on more significant successes. For example, if you tend to avoid, you can start by having a meal with a colleague rather than immediately trying to build deep friendships, and so on. The second layer of meaning is maintaining ongoing success. In other words, if you decide to open up, you must continually work towards it without expecting a one-time fix. Insecurity has become a part of your personality and habits, and if you can't consistently correct it, it will quickly revert. In summary, through self-dialogue, we learn to identify whether we harbor insecurity in our psyche and how to assess it correctly. We then go a step further by distinguishing between the healthy thinking self and the negative thinking self plagued by insecurity. Afterward, we firmly reject thoughts influenced by insecurity, forget about problems, and immerse ourselves in the present moment and continually self-motivate. Through these steps, we can correct the bad habits of insecurity and improve our lives. One point worth mentioning is not to become addicted to being rescued. Many people with psychological troubles may seek therapy in the hope of getting answers. They clear their problems and troubles and eagerly await therapists to provide solutions and cure their psychological issues. By delegating the responsibility of problem-solving to therapists, they feel relieved and their suffering diminishes. However, gradually they may become dependent on therapists, which is detrimental because self-training aims to strengthen your self-reliance, enabling you to overcome difficulties and face life on your own. With that said, the core content of this book has been covered. Let's briefly recap. First, we discussed how the bad habit of insecurity forms. Every child encounters problems beyond their understanding during their growth, which can make them feel very helpless or traumatized, leading to the formation of insecurity. Without intervention, insecurity gradually deepens in your mind, becoming part of your personality, affecting your thinking and cognitive habits, and consequently, your life. Secondly, we talked about how people lacking inner security often attempt to control life entirely and analyzed several typical control strategies, such as the pursuit of perfection, avoidance, deception, and more. However, life cannot be completely controlled, and attempting to gain psychological security through controlling life is inherently flawed. Lastly, we discussed the 5-step psychological therapy method, also known as self-talk therapy. Through this effective self-training method, we can correct the bad habits of insecurity, break free from its influence, and gain the strength to continue living the life we desire. In essence, the author of this book aims to convey, through over 30 years of clinical experience, that the foundation of psychological therapy or training should always be within yourself, not with a therapist or anyone else. Because apart from yourself, no therapy expert can change you. They simply possess professional insight and guidance beyond your own. Therefore, if we can gain insight into our own psychological conditions, we can alleviate our psychological troubles. After listening to this book, I hope you can reassess your own state and find the strength to face and improve your life. Alright, that's the conclusion of this audiobook. Congratulations on completing another book. Thank you for your support and attention. Please subscribe to the channel, like, and share this valuable knowledge with your friends. Let's combine wisdom with practicality to achieve our financial goals and create a better future. Thank you and see you next time.